And now we see Patti Armstrong from the Catholic Marketing Network in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. She's our latest author guest. She's got a great new book called Holy Hacks, Everyday Ways to Live Your Faith and Get to Heaven. And welcome. Always great to see you. It's been a while since we got to talk about one of your books.
Yeah, hi Doug. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Now, you talk about it, even this idea of hacks, which is those kids use those hacks. And what is a hack? For the average person watching the show might say, well, I hear my kids use it or my grandchildren use it, but I don't really understand. What's a hack?
Well, the idea came from life hacks. Life hacks are ways to do things creatively, easy, clever, live life better. So a holy hack is about living eternal life, for eternal life. And so that's where the idea came from.
All right. Well, you talk about it in the introduction. The idea of holy hacks came to me after spending time visiting my 92-year-old widower dad. And he was in Michigan, and you had to go and visit him from North Dakota. Now I was a little concerned about this. You said, when guests arrive, Dad puts down his rosary or turns off EWTN. Now, is that a positive?
It is, because it's always on. He always has it on. He prays the rosary, but he realizes he wants to be gracious and welcome people. And EWTN gets turned back on, and he gets back to his rosary. So it's just not, he doesn't practice his faith in your face, but he practices it, proudly.
Right. Now, in living the holy hack life, you say holiness has a bad reputation. Holy Hacks puts together to show life hacks and holiness go hand in hand. When did you come up with that idea, that they did in fact go hand in hand?
Well, it just came to me. If you're a writer, you get a lot of inspiration, and I realized that, and so the inspiration came when I was going to visit my dad, and I saw how growing up, how he integrated his faith into his life. It wasn't separate. He never stopped living it. But there were so many little things. Like when I looked at him, he's 93 going on 94 now. He can't get down and genuflect anymore, but at 91, he was genuflecting all the way down to the floor. And I thought, he does all these little things consistently, and there's so many things in our life, that I said in the book, it doesn't turn your life upside down, but it expands your ability to practice your faith and love God in a way that goes deep and ultimately does turn your life upside down. But it does it incrementally in ways that you don't feel like that it's more than you can handle.
Now, in the Holy Hack section, you talk about St. Teresa's little way, in a sense, being applied to a holy hack. How so?
Because she did the little things. We don't have to do the big things. And I also said, that I think some of us are worried we're suffering from chronic ordinariness. Well, St. Teresa, the little flower, was so ordinary that when she died, nobody knew what they were going to say about her, and she became such a well-loved and popular saint. And so she's kind of a model for that we're not going to do something that's so amazing that we're going to be picked up on the news, but it's those little things that become the big things in our faith.
Now, when you have each of these chapters, you have different holy hacks in different chapters to kind of relate to the particular humility or things like that. And you list them. One here is abstain from complaining. Don't even grumble about the weather. You need to accept your cross. Did you have a standard amount you did, and how did you develop the ones who were there? These ones you just recognized you were already doing? Were these ones that people suggested to you, or how did that work?
It's a combination of all those things. When you walk with the Lord, you are often open to suggestions, ideas, things strike you. That my dad and I once joked. He said, well, if you complain about the weather, just remember who the weatherman is. And I thought, I think a lot of us have heard before to abstain from complaining or give up complaining for Lent. And you start to realize, if you focus on that, you start to realize how many things we do complain about. And instead, we can turn it around. And one of my hacks is to do a rosary of gratitude. And all you do is on each bead, think of something you're thankful for. And in that thankfulness, you start to look at the things you're grumbling about. For instance, the bad weather. Well, instead of complaining about the weather, why don't you thank God that you have a house? Instead of grumbling, if you got a flat tire, who likes a flat tire? Nobody. But stop and think. You have a car. You can call a tow truck. You can get it fixed. It's not the end of your world. And every time we're about to complain about something, we can actually think about the things we have to be thankful for, and it's not so bad.
Right. It's. I remember Father Andrew Apostoli talking about how gratitude is really the key to humility in how we live our lives. So in Holy Hacks for Humility, that's my segue to chapter 2, you talk about something called holy forgetfulness. What's that?
Because a lot of people think being humble is, oh, I'm not so good, you know, this whole thing. And that is not humility. That is still very self-focused. So to be humble is to forget yourself. Now, we live with ourselves 24/7, so it's not very easy. But by focusing on others, we start to forget ourselves and start to care about others. And it doesn't mean not to love yourself, because I make the point in the book that Jesus tells us to love our neighbor as ourselves. So that means we do need to love ourselves, or we're not going to do a very good job of loving our neighbor. And by recognizing that the best that we do is what God has given us, our gifts, serving Him, that we can celebrate our gifts by celebrating and being thankful to God. And Mother Teresa said, you know, being humble is knowing who you are. And there's a lot of freedom in that. You don't have to go around trying to show everybody how great you are, because that's exhausting, and you never feel like you're measuring up. And if you just take comfort in who you are, and I'm nothing without God, but with Him I'm everything, and you celebrate that and you love it in yourself.
Well, in Holy Hacks in this section, you say, choose to be last in line. Also, be countercultural. Seek service over fame. And you make the point that recent studies show that being famous is one of the top things kids focus on today. That's a real problem.
Yes, and it's a real problem because it's so elusive. And what is fame? It's never going to be enough. There's always going to be somebody more famous than you. And some of the most unhappy people in the world are the most famous people in the world. And one of my hacks is to keep your death before your eyes, and that just helps you put everything in perspective. When George Harrison died, I just had this sudden flash, this sudden realization, you know, he's nobody now. And it really brings to reality that everything we have in this world, we don't take with us, but our love, our service, the things we did for God, that's what we take with us. In the world's eyes, that might be nothing, but in God's eyes, it's everything. And it gives you a certain peace, and it brings you to humbleness. It brings you to humility, because the things that the world thinks is so important really isn't.
They're really not. But you also talk about embracing failure, but you make the point, I'm not saying you should seek it. Why would you embrace failure?
It's funny, because I have an article I'm working on how to fail your way to success. And, you know, Jesus told the apostles to shake the dust off their feet and go to the next town. Well, guess what? They failed. They didn't convert everybody. And so in failure are lessons. And there's also God's message that this isn't what He intended for you. You know, one of my favorite stories of failure is in St. Faustina's diary. And there's a priest being obedient to God, but things aren't working out. And St. Faustina asked Jesus, she said, why are you letting him fail? He's doing everything that you've asked of him. And Jesus said, failure in man's eyes is not the same as failure in God's eyes. And you realize that priest was succeeding because he was being obedient to God. And so I don't say to seek failure, I say to embrace it. If you're walking with the Lord and you're doing your best and it doesn't work out, embrace whatever reason God allowed that to happen, and, you know, offer it up and just try to seek whatever God has for you to do next.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for embracing your calling. Patti Maguire Armstrong, great to see you again, the author of Holy Hacks, Everyday Ways to Live Your Faith and Get to Heaven. And it's published by Ave Maria Press. Thank you so much for joining us from the floor of the Catholic Marketing Network. Have a great show.
Thanks, Doug. God bless you.